news that the former president, rather notorious for lying, also lied about his coronavirus diagnosis. In a new book by former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, obtained by the Guardian newspaper, Meadows claims that Trump first tested positive on September 26. That was 3 days before his first debate with Joe Biden and nearly a week before Trump publicly acknowledged that he had, in fact, contracted the virus. On September 26, then President Trump hosted a White House event, both inside and outside, for then Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. At least 12 attendees later tested positive. Later that day, Meadows says Trump was looking tired on their way to a rally in Pennsylvania when White House Dr. Sean Connolly called, saying that Trump had tested positive for COVID. Meadows says Trump was tested a second time, and that one came back negative. The next day, Trump hosted an indoor White House reception for Gold Star families, followed by a maskless news conference in the White House briefing room. 2 days later, on September 28th, Trump hosted 2 outdoor events, one with business leaders, another on COVID testing. Then, of course, we had debate day, where Meadows reports Trump was moving slower than usual, but, quote, nothing was going to stop him from going out there. A few days after that, 6 days after his first positive test, Trump finally acknowledged that he had coronavirus and was hospitalized. The former president responded to the new revelations today, calling them, quote, fake news, though we should note, again, this news comes from his loyal former chief of staff and his book, a book that Mr. Trump has previously endorsed as, quote, fantastic and a great Christmas present. Let's discuss this with former White House Communications Director under Trump, Alyssa Farah Griffin, and Dr. Jonathan Reiner, the former physician to Vice President Dick Cheney and consultant to the Obama and Trump White House medical units. Alyssa, congratulations on your wedding. Thank you for being here. So, reporters asked you and other White House officials multiple times about the timeline leading up to Trump's diagnosis. This is what your colleague Kayleigh McEnany said, followed by something that you said.
I'm not going to give you a detailed readout with timestamps of every time the president's tested. He's tested regularly.
I can't reveal that at this time. The doctors would like to keep it private since it's his private. My understanding is that it's his private medical history.
So were you intentionally misleading the public on that, or was there something else going on that we don't know about?
No, absolutely not. Jake, very few things shocked me, and this revelation shocked me. I was getting inquiries from reporters. Credit to Maggie Haberman. I think she suspected that this may have been the case because she was hounding me for the timeline. So I went to Dr. Connolly. I went to Chief of Staff Meadows and said, when was his first test? When did he first pop positive? And I was told, we're not revealing that for HIPAA reasons. So that was the instruction I was given from our chain of command. But let me say this, full stop, this demonstrates a flagrant lack of regard for public health and for the well-being of others. At this time in the White House, I had staffers who were pregnant. I had one who's a multi-time cancer survivor. We had plenty of people in the West Wing who were over 65. We could have killed one of our colleagues. And instead they decided to not tell anyone, putting every single one of us at risk. And
but you didn't know, is the point.
Oh, absolutely
you didn't know.
No.
And Dr. Reiner, we don't know which kind of test the former president took when he got that positive result, but the second test he took was an antigen test. Is a negative result from an antigen test enough to clear somebody who had previously tested positive to go back into the public?
No, but we know that the White House was relying heavily on Abbott's rapid molecular PCR test, their ID Now test. There was, you may remember, sort of towards the beginning of the pandemic, there was a ceremony at the White House where Abbott delivered several of these machines for use, and this is how they screened press and visitors to the White House, with these rapid, relatively accurate PCR devices. So my strong guess is that the president's positive test came back with the ID Now test, which takes about 15 minutes. And then according to the book, they tried to stop the president from leaving, but he wanted to continue. And on board Air Force One, it appears he was tested with an antigen Binax Now test. Now, the thing about the antigen test is that they have, although their ability to detect to tell that you don't have the virus is quite high. Their ability to detect a positive test, particularly in patients at the beginning of their illness, is less good. And you would never verify a positive test with an antigen test. So the president was positive on the 26th, and the White House physician knew it. What's astonishing to me is that the White House physician kept the fact that the president of the United States was positive for COVID secret
Dr. Connolly, Sean Connolly.
for 3 days, allowing multiple events, including the Amy Coney Barrett event, the Gold Star family event, and then the debate.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And when you think about Joe Biden is certainly in a vulnerable group. He's a man in his late 70s. Alyssa, so here you have, I mean, I can't even make sense of this, but Mark Meadows, who is a very loyal person to Donald Trump, he reveals this in his book. Trump calls it fake news, even though it's from Meadows' book. His spokeswoman, Liz Harrington, Trump's spokesperson, puts out this statement, and then Mark calling it fake news, and Mark Meadows retweets it. Can you explain this to us?
Not really, but I will say this. The vast majority of the people working in the White House, especially around the task force under Trump, took COVID seriously. But there were a handful of senior-most staff who genuinely thought it was nothing short of the common cold, even when we had over 150,000 Americans who had died at that time. And I think the fact that Mark published this suggests that he still thinks that. He doesn't seem to have reflected on the fact that this was a terrible move in how to handle this, and that he absolutely should have disclosed to the public and quarantined the president. So that's what makes me nervous about that whole orbit, is they still seem to not get that this is a terrible, serious, deadly virus, and that this action was deeply reckless.
And I mean, we should just note, you talked about physician Dr. Sean Connolly, who at the very least hid this from the public. But when you think about people who are in vulnerable groups who met with Donald Trump, right? You talk about cancer survivors, a pregnant woman, Chris Christie, who contracted coronavirus, probably got it at that White House event. He's certainly in a vulnerable group. There are others. I mean, isn't that a violation of Dr. Connolly's Hippocratic Oath?
Exactly. Dr. Connolly has really in this instance, he has really two responsibilities. One is to do the right thing for his patient, which clearly at that first positive test is 10 days of isolation. 10 days of isolation after testing positive. And then his responsibility is to start contact tracing everyone the president has been with, because everyone that the president might have infected someone else. This is how viruses work, and we've seen how this has gone for the last 2 years. So Dr. Connolly had not just a responsibility to his patient, but he had a responsibility to the public. And some communicable diseases are reportable, as is COVID.
Yeah.
Which is why people get phone calls when they test positive and they are contact traced. So he just breached his duty as a physician. Now, if I were the White House physician and I was told, don't say anything about this, I would resign.
Why do you think Meadows is doing this now? Just to sell books? I don't understand.
I think he thought that whole ordeal was not a big deal.
Not a big deal.
That's my best guess.
Just that it was like,
I don't think he would do anything
that would, funny story?
Right, that would make President Trump angry with him, which he seems to be based on the statement. But let me just say this, because it bears repeating and we can't say it enough. It's never too late to do the right thing. Donald Trump should still go out and tell his supporters, I got the vaccine. My wife got the vaccine. My kids got the vaccine. You can trust it and it's safe. He's yet to do that. It could make a huge difference when half the country still isn't vaccinated. So maybe this will be a wake-up call to him.
And just so people know, behind closed doors, we did this on Twitter. I got my booster, and I'm advising you where to get your booster. These vaccines work; they're great. And Donald Trump was part. I mean, he okayed the funding of it. Yeah. Operation Warp Speed. All right, Alyssa Farah, Griffin.